Do you sometimes feel that the atmosphere is heavy, or that a certain person always says something that you feel has a double meaning? If you just thought of someone or some situation, it means that your intuition is screaming a truth that you're afraid to face, or we don't even think deeply about. In his years of profession, Carl Jung discovered that our unconscious always recognizes emotional predators before our conscious mind. And in the next few minutes, you'll learn to decipher these signals that can save your sanity, your balance. And it's not just the heavy atmosphere, your body also knows. Have you noticed how your breathing changes when this person arrives? How your muscles automatically contract? How you find yourself choosing words very carefully, as if you were walking in an emotional minefield? Your stomach tightens for no apparent reason. You feel a strange fatigue after interactions that should be normal. Your hands sweat slightly, your heart races. You catch yourself checking the tone of your own voice, censoring thoughts before even expressing them. This is your autonomic nervous system screaming, "Danger!" Carl Jung spent decades studying what he called signals from the unconscious, those alerts that our psyche emits long before our rational mind can process the danger. In his studies with more than 2,000 patients, he discovered something disturbing. Only 3% of people can consciously identify a narcissist in their most intimate circles. The other 97% live for years being emotionally drained, without understanding why. Jung documented cases where patients developed inexplicable physical symptoms: constant migraines, digestive problems, chronic insomnia, that mysteriously disappeared when they moved away from certain people in their lives. The body knew what the mind still denied. That feeling that you need to perform when you're around certain people, that mental exhaustion after talking to someone who theoretically loves you, that confusion about what really happened in an argument. This is not a coincidence. It's your internal alarm system working perfectly. Do you know what's most frightening? Jung discovered that the more empathetic and emotionally intelligent you are, the longer it takes to consciously identify a nearby narcissist. Because your mind tries to find explanations, justifications, contexts that explain the destructive behavior. The truth that Carl Jung discovered is shocking. Narcissists don't choose their victims randomly. They have an emotional radar that identifies empathetic, sensitive people with a strong sense of family loyalty. They instinctively know that these people will question themselves before questioning their behavior. In his clinical studies, Jung observed that narcissists possess an almost supernatural ability to identify emotional donors, people who naturally prioritize others' needs over their own. It's as if they had a sixth sense to detect who will tolerate behaviors that other people would simply reject. Jung called this inversion of psychic reality. The narcissist can make you believe that the problem is in your perception, not in their behavior. It's such a subtle manipulation that you begin to doubt your own sanity. They rewrite the narrative of reality so convincingly that you question your own memories, emotions, and perceptions. Here's what really happens in your brain. When you live with a narcissist, your nervous system enters a state of constant hypervigilance. You develop what Jung called emotional antennas, an exaggerated ability to read micro-expressions, tones of voice, and body language, because unconsciously you know you need to protect yourself. Jung discovered something even more disturbing. Victims of narcissism develop a form of survival intelligence so refined that they can predict a narcissist's mood even before they enter the room. They learn to read subtle signs, the sound of footsteps, the way the door closes, the tone of hi, and automatically adjust their behavior to avoid conflicts. The problem is that the conscious mind is still trying to rationalize, but he's my father, but she's my best friend, but they've always been with me. Meanwhile, your unconscious is screaming, "Danger! Danger! Danger!" This is the psychological prison that Jung identified. You become an expert in managing someone else's emotions while completely losing touch with your own emotional needs. Carl Jung identified 5 behavioral patterns that never fail in identifying a narcissistic personality in your close circle. These aren't obvious signs that everyone knows. They're specific ways to recognize deep psychological patterns that he discovered by analyzing hundreds of patients over decades. I'll show you exactly how to identify each of these patterns in the people around you. From today on, you'll never be caught by surprise again. You'll never leave a conversation feeling confused, drained, and questioning your own perception of reality, because you'll know exactly what kind of person you're dealing with. If you're feeling that finally someone understands this silent pain you carry, you're not alone. Thousands of people here have discovered these Jungian truths and transformed their lives. They learned to trust their own intuition again and to protect themselves from emotional manipulations. If this makes sense to you, subscribe to the channel. This is how this awakening community grows, and this is how more people find the freedom that Carl Jung offers. Because when you subscribe, you're not just supporting a channel, you're helping other people like you find these truths that literally save lives. First way. Jung discovered that narcissists have a completely distorted relationship with others' vulnerability. When you share something intimate, painful, or that leaves you exposed, observe the person's reaction. A healthy person will show genuine empathy, ask questions to better understand, or simply maintain respectful silence. The narcissist will do one of three things. First, they'll minimize your pain. That's nothing. Others have gone through worse things. You're being dramatic. Second, they'll redirect the conversation to themselves. That reminds me of when I went through. Third, and this is the most dangerous, they'll store this information as ammunition to use against you in the future. Jung called this wound collecting. The narcissist collects your vulnerabilities like a predator studies the prey's weak points. They have an impressive selective memory, completely forgetting their own failures, but remembering with surgical precision each moment of fragility you've shared. In his studies, Jung observed a specific pattern. When you share a vulnerability with a narcissist, in the first moments, they might even seem empathetic. But observe the body language. There's a coldness in the eyes, a mechanical quality in the response, as if they were following a social script instead of genuinely feeling. Days, weeks, or months later, in some argument, they'll use exactly what you shared in confidence to attack you where it hurts most. And it's not just using the information, it's using it with cruel precision, choosing exactly the moment when you're most vulnerable to deliver the blow. Jung documented cases where patients reported feeling emotionally raped after these experiences. The sensation of having your soul exposed and then attacked at the most sensitive points created such a deep trauma that many people simply stopped opening up to anyone. If you've ever caught yourself thinking, how can he use precisely this against me? Or, how did she remember exactly the thing that hurts me most? You've just identified a narcissist. People who really love you protect your vulnerabilities like sacred treasures. They don't transform them into weapons of emotional warfare. The vulnerability test never fails. Share something genuinely intimate and observe not just the immediate response, but how that information is treated over time. The way someone handles your most fragile moments reveals exactly who they are. Second way. This is one of the most insidious patterns that Jung documented. The narcissist has a supernatural ability to reverse responsibilities and make you feel guilty for problems they themselves created. It works like this. They do something that hurts you. When you try to express your pain or establish a boundary, magically the conversation transforms and you become the villain of the story. Phrases like, "You're being too sensitive. That's not what I meant. You always interpret everything wrong," are giant red flags. Jung realized that narcissists never take real responsibility. They may even apologize, but it always comes with a but. "Sorry, but you also did. Sorry, but if you hadn't." This isn't an apology. It's a manipulation to make you take part of the blame for something that isn't your responsibility. The most disturbing thing is that they do this with such conviction that you begin to believe it. You leave these conversations thinking, maybe I really did overreact. Maybe I am the problem. Maybe I should have spoken differently. If you constantly find yourself taking blame for conflicts you didn't create, questioning your own legitimate emotional reactions, or apologizing for being hurt by something that hurt you, you're dealing with a narcissist. Jung observed another specific pattern. Narcissists use what he called phantom responsibility. They make you feel responsible for emotions and reactions that are exclusively theirs. You made me nervous. Because of you, I was sad. You forced me to yell. As if you had a remote control for their emotions. The psychologically healthy person assumes, I got nervous. I felt sad. I chose to yell. The difference is subtle in language, but gigantic in psychological dynamics. Third way. Carl Jung discovered something fascinating about how narcissists respond to others' emotions. He called it emotional mirroring deficit. Psychologically healthy people naturally mirror and validate others' emotions. If you're sad, they show empathy. If you're excited, they rejoice with you. The narcissist does the opposite. When you're happy, they find a way to diminish your joy. You're overreacting. It's not that big a deal. I did that years ago. When you're sad, they either completely ignore it or compete with your pain. You think that's bad. Let me tell you what happened to me. But here's the most revealing sign. Observe how the person reacts when you achieve something important. A narcissist can never be genuinely happy about your success. They might pretend for a few seconds, but soon comes the but. That's good, but did you see that so-and-so achieved more? Congratulations. But now the responsibility will be greater. Nice. But I always knew you would succeed. Jung noted that narcissists have a pathological need to be the center of emotional attention. They can't share the stage, even with people they supposedly love. Your successes are a threat to their fragile ego. If you constantly find yourself trying to make someone genuinely happy about your achievements, or if you avoid sharing good news because you know the reaction will be strange, you've identified a narcissist. Fourth way. Jung extensively studied how narcissists manipulate relationships through what he called emotional triangulation. It's one of the most devastating and least understood tactics. It works like this. The narcissist always involves a third person in emotional dynamics. It could be a sibling, a friend, another relative, or even people who aren't present. The goal is to create competition, insecurity, and emotional dependence. Typical phrases include, your sister would never question me like this. So-and-so understands what I'm going through. So-and-so agrees with me that you're overreacting. Everyone thinks you. No one else has a problem with me. Only you. Jung realized that this tactic serves multiple perverse purposes. First, it makes you feel isolated and question your own perceptions. Second, it creates a competition where you strive to win the narcissist's approval. Third, it establishes the narcissist as the supreme judge of who's right or wrong. The most insidious part is that often these other people don't even know they're being used in the manipulation. The narcissist may be telling completely different versions of the same story to different people, creating a network of allies who don't even know their pieces in a manipulative game. Jung documented cases where the narcissist went as far as inventing conversations or opinions from these third parties. So-and-so said you're being dramatic, when so-and-so never said that or doesn't even know what it's about. Triangulation also works with constant comparisons. See how grateful your cousin is. Your friend would never treat me like this. Other people value what I do. The goal is always to make you feel inadequate, problematic, different from normal people. If you constantly hear about how other people are better than you, more understanding, less problematic, or if you find yourself competing for attention or approval with people who aren't even present, you're being triangulated by a narcissist. Fifth way. Jung identified a peculiar pattern in how narcissists deal with memory and relationship history. They have an impressive ability to selectively remember only versions of facts that favor them. When confronted about something they did, they genuinely seem not to remember, or remember a completely different version of events. It's not conscious lying. It's a psychological distortion where the narcissistic mind automatically rewrites history to protect the ego. Jung called this narcissistic historical revision. It's as if they had an internal editor constantly rewriting memories, removing any evidence of personal failure and amplifying any evidence that they were victims or heroes of the situation. They perfectly remember every mistake you've ever made, every inappropriate word you said, every moment when you weren't perfect. But they conveniently forget their own failures, broken promises, and destructive behaviors. Jung observed that this creates a pattern where you're constantly defending your version of reality. You find yourself saying things like, "But you said," "But this happened," "Don't you remember?" And the answer is always, "It wasn't like that. You're making this up. Your memory is failing." The most disturbing thing is that they do this with such conviction that you begin to doubt your own memory. Jung called this murder of consensual reality. Over time, you stop trusting your own memories and begin to accept their version as truth. A specific pattern that Jung identified is selective promise erasure. The narcissist makes promises or commitments, but when the time comes to fulfill them, they genuinely don't remember having promised anything. Or they remember a version where the promise had conditions that were obviously not met. Another pattern is offense amplification. If you make a small mistake, it becomes gigantic in the narcissist's memory and is constantly remembered. If they make a big mistake, either it was unintentional or you're exaggerating its importance. If you frequently feel confused about what really happened in past conversations or situations, if you find yourself questioning your own memory, or if you avoid bringing up past events because you know it will turn into an argument about who remembers correctly, you've just identified a narcissist in your close circle. These are the 5 infallible ways that Carl Jung developed to identify narcissists around us. When you recognize these patterns in people close to you, be they family members, close friends, or partners, you finally have the tools to understand what's happening and why you feel drained or confused after interacting with them. Now that you know the 5 signs, I'll teach you how to apply this knowledge in a practical and safe way. Jung always emphasized that knowledge without application is useless, and misapplied knowledge can be dangerous. First step, strategic documentation. Start noting specific situations where you identify these patterns, not to immediately confront the person, but to validate your own perceptions. Narcissists are masters at making you question your sanity. Having concrete records helps you keep your foot in reality. Jung recommended what he called a pattern diary. Note the date, time, exactly what happened, how you felt before, during, and after the interaction. After a few weeks, you'll start to see clear patterns that previously seemed like isolated situations. Second step, detached scientific observation. When you're in a conversation with someone you suspect is a narcissist, imagine you're an anthropologist studying human behavior. Observe the reactions, patterns, tactics, without becoming emotionally involved. This protects you from manipulation and gives you mental clarity. Jung called this the observer function, a part of your mind that remains objective and analytical even in emotionally charged situations. With practice, you develop the ability to be present in the conversation while simultaneously analyzing behavioral patterns. Third step, intelligent energy boundaries. You don't need to immediately cut contact with everyone you identify as a narcissist, especially if they're family members. But you can drastically limit how much emotional energy you invest in these relationships. This means not sharing vulnerabilities with these people, not expecting emotional validation from them, not trying to convince them of anything, and especially not taking responsibility for their emotional problems. Jung said, "You can love someone from a safe emotional distance." Fourth step, developing psychological resistance. When someone tries to use these tactics on you, mentally respond, "I see what you're doing, and it won't work on me." You don't need to say this out loud, but maintaining this internal awareness protects you from manipulation. Jung taught a specific technique. Visualize a shield of golden light around you when interacting with toxic people. This may seem esoteric, but it works because it activates your conscious intention of psychological protection. Fifth step, support network and reality check. Find at least one person you completely trust who can serve as a reality checker. When you suspect you're being manipulated, talk to this person. Narcissists thrive in isolation. Having an external perspective breaks the cycle of confusion. Sixth step, the grey rock technique. Jung developed the concept of neutral presence. When you can't avoid interacting with a narcissist, become emotionally inaccessible. Short answers: neutral tone, no visible emotional reaction. You become so boring that they lose interest in manipulating you. Seventh step: rebuilding self-confidence. Jung observed that victims of narcissism develop a pathological dependence on external validation. Practice making small decisions without consulting anyone. Start trusting your own perceptions and feelings again. Remember, you're not responsible for healing narcissists. You're not responsible for understanding them. You're not responsible for tolerating destructive behaviors because they're family or they've always been like that. Your only responsibility is to protect your own mental and emotional health. Jung said that the greatest revolution a person can make is to stop sacrificing themselves for those who don't deserve it and start investing energy in those who genuinely value you. This isn't selfishness. It's psychological self-preservation. Carl Jung discovered something that forever changed the way we understand toxic relationships. The problem was never you. If you grew up in a narcissistic environment, you developed extraordinary survival skills. You became highly empathetic, intuitive, careful with words, sensitive to others' moods. These aren't weaknesses. They're emotional superpowers you developed to navigate dangerous territory. Jung documented that children of narcissists often become adults with above-average emotional intelligence, extraordinary interpersonal reading ability, and levels of empathy that border on the supernatural. The problem is that these same skills make you an attractive target for other narcissists in adult life. You unconsciously emit signals that you're someone who will tolerate behaviors that other people would immediately reject. Jung called this traumatic magnetism. You unconsciously attract what is familiar, even when it's destructive. Your brain was programmed to recognize narcissistic dynamics as normal, so you feel strangely comfortable in situations that should trigger all your internal alarms. But here's the liberating twist that Jung discovered. Once you become aware of these patterns, you can break the cycle. It's not about blaming your parents or other people who shaped you. It's about reclaiming your power of conscious choice. Jung observed that the most powerful awakening moment happens when a person finally says, "I deserve better." Not as an empty affirmation, but as a visceral truth that completely transforms their relationship criteria. The truth that will free you is this: you deserve relationships where you don't need to walk on eggshells. You deserve people who genuinely celebrate your achievements. You deserve conversations where your perspective is respected. You deserve love that doesn't come with impossible conditions to meet. Most importantly, you deserve to trust your own perception of reality. Your intuition isn't broken. It was trained by years of manipulation to question itself, but it always knew the truth. Now it's time to honor that internal wisdom that protected you for so long. If this video touched deep wounds, if you recognized yourself in many of these situations, leave a comment sharing your experience. This community is a safe space where people who've gone through similar traumas support each other. Share this video with someone who needs to hear these truths. Sometimes the right information at the right time can save a person's sanity. Carl Jung dedicated his life to helping people free themselves from invisible emotional prisons. Today, you took the first step in this journey of liberation. From now on, you'll never again be an unconscious victim. You have the power to consciously choose who deserves access to your heart and who needs to stay outside your emotional walls. Until the next video, and remember, trust your intuition. It has always known the truth.